Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I want to talk about books numbers 26 through 30 that I read in 2023, and I want to start with a short novella called Stockings Were Hung by J.L. Logosz and Vera Valentine. So I heard about this novella as I was catching up on videos in Kazen's channel. Her channel is always doing, and it just sounded like a absurd premise that I needed after reading a lot of very heavy books. So I got it on my Kindle and started reading it, and sure enough, it was an absurd premise, and it was just the kind of break from heavy reading that my brain needed. So there we go. If you pick up this novella, it's just going to be because of the ridiculous premise. That's it. All right, the next book that I finished was The Unquiet Dead. This is book number 1 in the Rachel Getty Attack series by Ausma Zehanat Khan. And this book I heard about from Jen over at Remembered Reads, and it is, I was really interested in it because it follows a female detective in a kind of community policing unit. The policing unit is headed by Detective Katon, and so you get to see kind of their interactions and their backstories. One of the things that I like about serialized stories like this is when you get to know more about the detectives themselves. They're not just tools in the mystery, and the two of them have really interesting backstories. In this book, you kind of at times get bogged down kind of finding more about these two characters, but it's essential in the first book in the series to do this, and their personal stories sound really interesting, so I'm looking forward to seeing their development over the course of the series. The mystery, however, is what really got me. And when the story begins, there is a man who is found dead, and our head, the chief of this unit, is being called in to potentially investigate this death. Except, why should this death be investigated? It's not clear that it's murder, except it turns out that the dead person is a war criminal from the Bosnian War and the genocide of Muslims that took place in the 1990s. And if you don't know much about the Bosnian War or the genocide that occurred there in the 90s, I think this book is gonna make you wanna start finding out more information. And to me, when fiction can do that, I think it is really, really fantastic. So while the book was not necessarily perfect for me, it because it did that, because it made me want to go down a rabbit hole of learning more about what happened in the Bosnian War. To me, that was it's a stellar read. This is one of the things I really like when fiction does it, and this did it just really, really well. On top of it, it did in a genre that I really love, mysteries, especially these kind of serialized detective stories. So I just really enjoyed it. If it's something that you might be interested at all in, I say pick it up. The pacing is slower because the author is doing a lot of going back and showing you what occurred, why this person, if they were murdered, and at first there's a big question on whether this person was murdered or not, why their death would brings up all of this Bosnian War stuff, and yeah, I just really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I'm looking forward to reading more books in the series. The next book that I finished was How to Turn into a Bird by Maria José Ferrada. This is a book that Shannon over at That So Pro messaged me about. She just finished reading it and thought that I would love it. And it's really interesting because I checked my library. My library had it. I immediately checked it out. It's a really, really short story about a man who ends up, he's taking care of this billboard, and he ends up moving into the space of the billboard, and we follow it through the eyes of I think it's his nephew, something like that, this young boy in the community. And it's all about how the actions of this one man disturb the community. Just by him choosing to live up in this billboard, he's not hurting anyone, he's not causing trouble, but that single act of going against the grain of what the community expects does disturb the community in a way that was really interesting to read. I need to go back and reread this story. I didn't give it any kind of star rating because I was reading in the middle of a bunch of other stuff that were very different in tone. And so I want to reread it and really, I think, capture more of what the author's trying to do with the story. Shannon really loved it, and has continued reading more from the author. So I might end up having to do the same. But it's just really interesting. It is kind of poetically written, which is not always my favorite thing, but in this kind of whimsical story, it really worked. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. The next book that I finished was What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez. This is a book by Claire Jiménez, and I really want to do a dedicated video to this book because it is a story that takes the true crime genre in the fiction setting, right? This is a work of fiction, but it follows some of the conventions of a true crime genre and then kind of does something really different with it. In the story, we begin with one of the sisters of Ruthie Ramirez who disappears, and she starts telling us the story of her sister's disappearance. The book is also set right after the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. And so we start learning more about the sister, her financial struggle since she just graduated from college and there are no jobs, and what she has to do as somebody who went to college to escape her family, the community where her sister disappeared, and kind of just a lot of the pressures and negative things about the life she was living before she was able to go off to college. Now she's back, and she is coming back with kind of less resources because she doesn't have a job. She's now kind of trapped back in the world that she was trying to escape. We also get chapters from the point of view of her older sister, who has been holding down the fort at home, taking care of their mom and of everything that needs to get done. And in the meantime, like, there's conflict between the two sisters at the same time that they're working to kind of resolve them because they are kind of pushed into trying to figure out what happened to their sister. And so it is using a lot of the conventions of true crime, but does some really interesting things with it. I'm not doing it justice in my quick summary because I don't want to reveal anything, and because I think it merits a kind of longer discussion, this story. So it's a young adult story, and I just really liked it. And as somebody who's not into young adult books at the moment, I thought this one was really fascinating and really quite well done. So the next book that I finished was Hijab, Butch Blues, a Memoir by Lamya H. So it's a memoir written by a Muslim woman who had moved from South Asia to, I forget, it's a Muslim country. And then from the Muslim country immigrates to the U.S. for college. And so she has this experience of being a Muslim and an immigrant in different places in the world. And she kind of brings us through her life and those experiences. And then once she's in the U.S., she's better able to explore her sexuality and what that means for her as an immigrant who's lived in all these different places and is now has the opportunity to do it. But at the same time, how the exploration of her sexuality conflicts with her exploration of her religion. As a young Muslim, she had begun kind of questioning some of the traditional ideas that she was being taught about Islam. And as she was reading the Quran more and more, she realized that, like, actually she was still wanted to be a Muslim. She is a practicing Muslim, but she rejects the interpretation of the Quran that is used to say that, like, you can't be gay, you can't, like, to marginalize certain groups of people. And in the U.S., she finds a Muslim community because part of it is, her trying to connect with a Muslim community in the U.S. as she is being discriminated against in the U.S. for being Muslim, but also how her queerness fits within a Muslim American setting. Oh, it's just, there are layers of complexity in the story and of this real life person that I just really enjoyed seeing her explore. Like, like, it is a book where she's just walking through her explorations of all this kind of conflict and intersection of sexuality, gender, nationality, immigrant status, and it is absolutely absorbing. I found the story to be absolutely absorbing and just really well written, because I was right there with her at every step of her storytelling. So it was really fantastic. Right. So this, and by the way, at this point, I have wrapped up most of my March Mystery Madness books. I have 2 books to go, so that those 2 will I will talk about in the in my next video. But I have to say that now that I've talked about most of the books that were in my March Mystery Madness TBR, I have to say that I have really enjoyed getting back into mysteries. Sometimes I put those books off because they don't feel as pressing as some of the other books that I'm reading. But what I've realized is that mysteries really serve a very similar place in my reading as romance novels, because they are kind of comfort food. In mysteries, the genre of mysteries and even thrillers is very similar to romance in that there's certain beats those genre books have to hit in order to fit within the genre. As a result, you know what to expect when you're reading, even though you don't know exactly what to expect, right? Because of the conventions of the genre. And so that is very comforting when I read them alongside much heavier books. And so I'm now going to be mixing in my reading a lot more of both romances and mysteries as part of my comfort reading that I read along with the nonfiction and heavier books. So anyways, let me know how you do it. Are you somebody who can mix in some mystery and romance to heavier reading, or do you kind of have to stick to one genre at a time? Because as you can see by this wrap up, I'm all over the place in my reading, and that's the way I like it. I'm a mood reader, and that's just how I've always read. Just reading multiple books at a time, and also reading from like all over the genres. It makes my reading life really interesting, and as a result, I feel like I get less slumpy. Like, I don't experience as reading slumps as much as I think other people might experience them. But anyways, if you've read any of these books, if you want to say anything at all, please leave a comment down below so we can chat. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.